Welcome to the regular Sunday Lovecraft eZine video show. This is a very special show because we're going to talk about author C.J. Henderson, who wrote some Lovecraftian books, pulp fiction, other books. We're also going to talk a little bit about Larry Latham, who is the author of the Lovecraftian comic Lovecraft is Missing. But about C.J. Henderson, unfortunately, for those who do not know, he passed away, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, from cancer. And several people suggested to me that it would be great to do a show dedicated to him, and I thought that was a great idea, so thanks to all those that suggested it. I'm lucky enough to have this show on this platform, but I did not know Mr. Henderson personally. I've read some of his books. It's been a while. The Teddy London series I particularly enjoyed, and Rick, I think he did some Kolchak books too, didn't he? Which were big Kolchak fans.
He did 3 Kolchak short stories and 2 novels, and he did a couple of comic book stories as well.
Oh, okay.
He's done some short stories too, which were non-mythos.
I'll have to check those out for sure. Pete brought 3 C.J. Henderson books that we're going to give away to 3 live viewers, so stay tuned and we'll do that. Most people watch this show at the, let me put you on screen, Pete, hold those up again, please.
Yeah, hold on.
If you're watching the show at the Lovecraft eZine website, which most people do, right below the video right below the video that you're watching this on, I've got several links. And one of those is a link to donate to C.J. Henderson's a fundraiser for his medical costs and funeral costs, as I understand it. So if you're able, please help the family out. There's also a link to a mini one-day convention, as I understand it, that they're doing next month. So click on those links. If you're watching the show and you click on the links, I've set it up so that they'll open up in a different page or a different tab, so you won't lose the show while you check them out. We've got, as usual, we've got Joe Pulver here, Olivia Llewellyn, Matt Carpenter, Pete Rollick, and Rick Lay, and we're also lucky enough to have Bob Price here. Good to see you, Bob. We're all good friends with him. And Bob particularly, I know, wanted to be here because he was very good friends with CJ, as I understand it. So, and I think you married him too, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk much. As I said, I didn't know Mr. Henderson except through his book. So I hear you got some great stories to share, and I know Rick has some pretty good information to share, and I'm sure the rest of you guys do too. So, so Bob, how did the marrying thing come about? Whatever you want to talk about, actually.
Well, Chris, and I always knew him as Chris. I know he went by CJ, and I published stories with that byline, but I always knew him as Chris. And he and I met in, I think it was 81. It could have been 80. Well, it was shortly after The Empire Strikes Back came out. I remember that because we met at a friend's apartment when he was having a Star Wars costume party, and Chris showed up as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I was Darth Vader. Didn't have a sword fight or anything though, but he was always promoting himself and his work, which of course is not a criticism. He was happy to do it, and he showed me this traveling portfolio he had of covers of books and magazines, and it was quite impressive. So the first time I met him, I knew he was a writer with a whole lot more success than I had, and I forget exactly. I guess the next time I saw him was probably at his then apartment in Brooklyn, and we're shooting the breeze about all sorts of things, and as if there weren't already proof positive that he and I were a couple of pathetic geeks. I remember he showed me this thing he really liked that he put on the record or CD, whatever the heck it was at the time, of the theme music for the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and read the opening of the George Reeves TV show, a strange visitor from another planet, and to show how the one exactly fit the other. That was pretty funny. And we talked about all kinds of stuff. And I would get to see him sometimes. It was obviously when I lived in New Jersey. I would drive over, get across the Goethals Bridge and the Verrazano Bridge, and go on the Bay Parkway and the Belt Parkway and so on, just to hang around with him and collaborate on some ideas for Crypt of Cthulhu. And while I was there, once he read me I believe the first Jack Hagee detective story, and he told me that the name Jack Hagee he got from a policeman he knew in Pittsburgh. And eventually he read me the first mythos story he did, called You Can't Take It With You, which was a Jack Hagee sort of a sequel to the Dunwich Horror. And I eventually reprinted that in my first Dunwich collection. And we knew each other pretty well, and I helped him move Tin's furniture from her apartment to his. Some of it, I don't quite remember the details now, but that's when I met her. And it wasn't too long afterward until he said they were getting married and wanted me to perform the wedding. By this time they lived in this terrific old house just down the street from where his apartment had been. And I remember we stood on the back porch, and I went through some sort of a wedding ceremony that I guess I'd cobbled together. Don't remember exactly what it was. This was when, which one was it? A Star Trek movie, the one where Kirk blows up the Enterprise. It was just coming out, if that helps date it. And I remember Mark Saraceni and Chuck Hoffman, who were good friends of Chris, who became dear friends of mine too, and still are. They were gossiping about what was reportedly going to happen in the Star Trek movie, and that the Enterprise was going to be blown up. Of course, I was thrilled to get the spoiler. But there were just all kinds of fun, non-epic things that went on, but that sort of helped knit the fabric of our long-standing friendship. And then, I forget exactly when, but about a year later, I guess.
By Star Trek and Star Wars movies, right?
What's that? I'm sorry.
In other words, I'm sorry to interject, but you date everything by Star Trek and Star Wars movies.
Doesn't everybody? And like before Vader and after Vader, and the dates and all that. When they had Erica, I was called on to baptize her, and I was ordained at this time, though in the Baptist church, where you don't baptize infants, but what did I care? And I put together some little baptismal liturgy involving some stuff from the Valentinian Gnostics, and it was great. And I'll shut up in a second, but food was always real important to Chris and me. He was a great cook and invited my family and me over for some terrific parties and feasts on different occasions, great Halloween costume parties, and he was like the perfect host. He would have the big table groaning under the weight of all these terrific dishes he had cooked, and it was just so much fun, and he was such a big enthusiastic bear of a guy. He was really some character to know. And I can go on and on, but let me give other folks a chance to say something.
Could you tell something about the Calum Club? Wasn't he in your Calum Club?
Yeah, this was at first kind of funny, because Lynn Carter set this thing up. Some of us used to gather at the Strand bookstore and Saturday every month, and we would then make our way to, Lynn Carter would come and we'd make our way to his apartment and while away the hours. That was a riot. And I wanted to invite Chris, but Lynn said he had such limited sit-down space, nobody was to invite anyone else. And I had the great thrill of explaining this to Chris. But eventually, when we just, later years, we would have it at my house in New Jersey, and Chris came sometimes. I remember one of the funniest things was when Joe Pulver and he were there, and they didn't exactly get along real great because both of them were type A's, and it was funny to see the fireworks that erupted sometimes.
I think it got along fine. You know, it's just we're both enthusiastic, and
Yep.
I had something to say and he had something to say, you know, and we would be elbowing to get to say it.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
mean, it was a riot, and it was great having the both of you in the same room.
You know. And we had different opinions on comic books and movies. And
Oh, yeah, you're not kidding.
And we were both opinionated. It wasn't nasty.
No.
It was, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's like
Yeah.
that movie sucked.
Well, I had the same sort of experience a few times when he would drop critical judgments on things that I could not believe. Like once they were visiting us down here in North Carolina shortly after the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie came out, and he was blasting it because it wasn't faithful enough to this and that scene. And I love the movie, and I was so offended, I nearly kicked him out of the house. Another time, I remember him saying, the Beatles weren't so great, The Who was better, and I thought, have I wandered into an insane asylum? And he once said he didn't get what was so great about The Prisoner, and I thought, you have lost your mind. And so, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, but he was kind of overbearing in many ways, but that's what you have to learn to expect from somebody who's bursting, as Joe says, with enthusiasm and creativity. So just got to decide you're going to get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, he was also really generous.
Yes,
you know,
he was.
and unbelievably friendly. He was, you know, a monstrous fan.
Yeah.
And his enthusiasm knew no bounds. And like fans, like creators, he was opinionated. So it would get heated, but it was friendly heated.
Mm-hmm.
It was never venomous.
No.
You know, it's like. But yeah, those Kalins were great. It was most often, of course, it was always Bob, but CJ was there most of the time. I was there most of the time. Cisco was often there. We had Brian McNaughton a few times, Rod Heather Allure a few times, Mark Saraceni a couple of times. You know, different people would pop in and out. It was great. You know, we read new stuff. We, you know, talked about different things that came along or things that were coming out. You know, opinions were bandied about. It was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, those were some of the greatest times, and there were a lot of them. I'm grateful to say. My daughter Victoria would attend these too, and I just could see in her eyes how this was enriching her. And she's a dyed-in-the-wool fan now. Lately, she and I have been watching DVDs of the Avengers cartoons and so on, and it was just great that she had the opportunity to be around these people, and as Joe says, to hear the works they read, and it was just so great.
Actually, speaking a little bit about Erica Henderson, I've never met her, but she is a successful artist. And
But
I'm
she
sure
used to
that
come once in a while back then, and she would draw. She would bring us stuff she drew, Was it Crypt? Was it Tales? There was something. She had a couple of her early drawings in Crypt or Tales of Lovecraftian Horror or Midnight Shambler, something.
Well,
I think she did the cover for Crypt 100.
Yeah. So, I mean, she was still just becoming a teenager back then. So
in the early 2000s, she collaborated with her father for something that's a collector's item now called Baby's First Mythos.
First Mythos, yeah.
So C.J. Henderson wrote an ABC and a counting poem, and she illustrated it. And I gotta say, even if the verse wasn't necessarily great, the drawings were fabulous. But she recently revised it. I don't know if it's available for commercial release yet. She did a Kickstarter, and I'm sure her father would be really, really happy if, in addition to getting, say, his books to support his estate, if you would head over and see if you could get a copy of the new issue of Baby's First Mythos with Erica's new artwork in it.
She really is phenomenal. Another thing they collaborated on that never saw the light of day was something that you would swear was a rip-off of Monster High, only this was years before that ever saw the light of day. And again, it was amazingly similar. It's great minds think alike, I guess, and her art was astonishing way back then. I'm very lucky to have a painting of Great Cthulhu she did for us here at the house. She's just phenomenal. She was once asked to be in a Broadway show in some capacity, but her mom didn't think it was a great idea. I don't know what lay behind that. She was half Chinese. Her mom, Tin, was actually from China, and she had Erica taking lessons in Mandarin Chinese every Saturday, and she's just an amazing kid, full of talent and intelligence. Of course, now not a kid, she's really flowered, though she did early.
I want to get back. I want to get back to C.J. Henderson in just a second, but the reason why I want to derail the conversation for a second is I know that Matt has to leave shortly, and I know that Matt especially wanted to talk about Larry Latham.
You know, I guess
Larry,
all of us.
Yeah, go ahead.
All of us hate to think about it, but even the people we admire and our favorite people, we're all going to die at some point. And you think that someone who's in the full flower of their art, well, maybe they'll be spared. But he's written this great comic, Lovecraft is Missing. It's actually got marvelous Lovecraftian sensibilities. It's very clever. It's beautifully drawn. And he's been plugging away at it since, I think, about 2010. Well,
which, by the way, it's free to read. It's at lovecraftismissing.com.
He has pancreatic cancer, and it's metastatic. And metastatic pancreatic cancer is a short-term survival. You know, people don't live very long with it. He has hired another artist. He told him the stories that he wanted to tell, and he himself is trying to draw the last few pages of the comic because he's got an idea of completion, and then he wants it to go into a graphic novel. But he probably won't live to see it. I think however, if you like his work at all, while he's alive, it's like I got to write to Mr. Henderson and tell him I really enjoyed Incident on Highway 19, how much I liked that story. And I was glad I could do it while he was still alive. And I think Larry Latham is still alive. We still have him with us. So now's the chance to go over and just send him an email, even if you just say best wishes and tell him how much you liked his comic.
Yeah, good point.
It's a great point, and we all work alone. We sit here, and a musician gets done on stage with a song, they get applause. We don't get that. A lot of time we wait years for a story. You could sell a story in a few days and wait a year or two to see it get in print. So you have no idea what the reaction out in the world is. And it does mean an awful lot. A ton. It can make as a creator, it can make your week. you know, to hear from somebody who said, "Oh man, I just read that. That was brilliant. Thank you." You know, that's a real good point, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, lovecraftismissing.com. You know, Larry. I've exchanged a few emails with Larry, and I've told him that anything I can do to promote what he's doing right now, I want to do. And but like Joe just said, getting an email from someone that says, "I love what you're doing," can just really make your whole day, make your whole week.
Because the thing is,
he's dealing with a lot right now. Mean a lot to him.
It's like I used to think like it used to be you had to be like one of the top mythos intelligentsia to have all this information about Lovecraft, his work, his history, his life. And now there's so many great biographies, and thanks to the work of S.T. Joshi and Robert Price, all these stories and incidents and history, it's all available to everyone, as well as like related authors. And what you find is Larry Latham's work is really brilliantly conceived, living and breathing in Lovecraftiana. There's a lot. It's like reading something, frankly, by Peter Rawlik. You know, there's all these little hints that are dropped, or names that just pop out of the blue, like Farnsworth appears in it. You know, it's really worth. I would just. I know we'll get back to CJ in a minute, but do yourself a favor this week and go visit Lovecraft is Missing, and then if you like it, send Mr. Latham a note.
Great. Sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, it really. There's been more than a few times. As a matter of fact, today I got a Facebook message from someone who just finished a couple of my books, and I'm working on something new, and there's a couple of pages that I spent 4 or 5 hours early this morning struggling with cursing at, and out of the blue, there's this message, about how wonderful they found the material. It makes all those struggles worthwhile. I
would pay
gold.
to read Lovecraft is Missing comic, but yet it's free to read online, so it's just that good, So definitely check it out. Larry, if you're watching this now or in the future, I did email Larry to tell him we'd be talking a little bit about him, but I'm sure he has a lot of important things to deal with. But Larry, if you're watching this now in the future, we do appreciate you. So, thank you. And anything we can do, we will do, I know. So, I know the most important question that everyone out there wants to know about C.J. Henderson, at least I do, and I think it's relevant, is was he a Marvel guy or a DC guy?
He was his own guy. Come on, give him credit. It's like, I read this thing, he said, like a lot of people, he has to have a day job. So he did tons of everything, from teacher to cook to custodian. But then he would, whenever he had a chance to write something, he'd write it. And he said he didn't care who sent him the commission. He'd.
No, I don't mean that.
Well,
I mean,
he wrote
yeah.
He wrote Batman comics.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, as a reader, Go ahead, John.
He did some indie comic work too.
Right.
CJ wouldn't turn down a job. He was writing movie reviews. He was writing book reviews. Yeah, he certainly wrote Kolchak.
Yep, but these are his comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, comics.
Rick, tell me a little bit about the Batman comics.
Well,
CJ, because I sat there, I don't know what it was. One of Bob's Chaosium anthologies, and CJ's, I really want to be in that. What do you need? And I'll say Bob said, I don't know, Nyarlathotep, what's the word count? 4,000 words, So if you, on Monday, if you told CJ I need a Nyarlathotep word story and it's 5,000 words, you'd have it at the end of the week no matter what.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, amazing, yeah.
Rick, go ahead.
Okay, and I don't know exactly what particular Batman comics were, but this is These are the comics he wrote for. He wrote Archie, Batman, The Punisher, Neil Gaiman's Lady Justice, which I believe was published by DC, and he did a comic book called Codename Ninja for Eternity Comics, and he recently wrote, or got published, a collection of short stories featuring the character who is a government agent named Kate Monroe, who is Chinese American.
And every time he showed up at the Calum, he always had his little briefcase. Well, it wasn't so little. And he'd pop it open and hand out copies of
That's right. Yeah.
whatever he had just received. He went to 10,000 little conventions wherever he could when they were close enough. He loved being out there meeting people. You know.
Well, I was at a convention with, I saw him at a convention in October. And if you buy something from him, he then goes, I'm going to give you a free magazine with one of my stories. But do you want R-rated or non-R-rated? So you get, so I always ordered the R-rated, and I got, Cthulhu Sex, I think, was the magazine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was either R or X, depending. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think he also wrote for X-Files comics, and I think he gave me some original art from that and from an Aquaman comic he had done. This guy, this is just amazing, this stuff he did. I believe as a reader and a comic fan, he was like me, ecumenical, and liked all the different kinds.
Yeah, because it seems like he often had comics that he had work in. A lot. More than just those few things.
He did the X-Mites, and I think the X-Mutants, and there was some legal trouble over that, but I think he prevailed.
Yeah, I remember reading X-Mutants. It was not bad. I enjoyed that. That was the beginning of the Independent series.
Did you say he
Marvel
wrote
and DC
X-Files,
weren't
Bob?
enough.
Was that novels or the series or?
The X-Mutants was a comic book.
No, the X-Files. I thought he said X-Files a minute ago.
Yeah, there was an X-Files comic book that he did. He wrote some for.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it seems to me there were a lot of comics where he wrote 1 or 2 issues. I mean, he wasn't, let's say, a Batman for a year kind of thing. You know, he did, I don't know, Batman 232, and then he would do, Kill Ugly Radio 19 or something. You know what I mean? So.
Now, I do want to talk, if people want to delve into his work, because that's the way you can hear him speak to you now is through his work. I gotta say that for his mythos stuff, I don't know that originality was a big part of it. He would take he loved the characters of Lovecraft, and he thought, well, it was a shame that they didn't have more stories. So, for example, he wrote at least 6 or 7 stories about Inspector Legrasse, and he then compiled them into this book. And then you saw also Thomas Malone from the Horror at Red Hook. He wrote Thomas Malone stories. He loved detectives and hard-boiled stuff. But if you want a sampler of all his stuff, Dark Regions Press put out, it's not an omnibus. A man who wrote so many stories, you can't really do an omnibus. Although Mr. Price may have something to say about that, but you can get Degrees of Fear, and I believe it's available as an ebook for a less expensive edition, and it's got a lot of his better stuff. It's got my favorite mythos story, which is standalone, and I thought really pretty original, called Incident on Highway 19, which is really a great story about a guy in Pennsylvania, I think. He goes around, he's the guy who goes around and collects roadkill off the road, and he pulls up a little carcass, and it just doesn't look right. and he spins a nice little yarn off that. I really liked it. But I thought Robert Price could tell us we maybe got something to look forward to.
Yeah, this was in the works, and I had Chris's ideas shortly before he died. There was to be, believe it or not, a single volume best mythos fiction of C.J. Henderson, and he wanted to know if I wanted to write introductions like I did for the Chaosium books. I said, you bet I do, of course. And he began sending me the stories to look over, and he said there would be over 100 of them, which didn't surprise me. And once the publisher shortly contacted me, I said, the only problem I see here is narrowing this down. Is there any way it could be more than one volume? And he did agree to a second one at least. So there, of course, should be more than that, but that's going to be a lot of fun to do. I nudged him into writing some of these. Like one of my favorites was Idiot Savant, which I got him to write for my Azathoth cycle. Oh boy, so creative. But yeah, that's really going to be an embarrassment of riches.
Who's going to publish it?
Oh boy. My senility's striking again. I cannot think of it.
Dude, you're my age. You can't go see now yet.
Oh boy. Jeez, I can't think of it.
Well, since we have a lot of obviously Lovecraft fans watching us, could all of you, or I think just about everyone here is more of an expert than I am on Mr. Henderson, talk about, he's got his mythos stuff, he's got that Teddy London series, I know, and just kind of take it from there.
Well, like Matt said, he loved pulp, he loved hard-boiled crime, you know. He loved all kinds of characters. He'd rather take a Kolchak or an Anton Zarnak or an Inspector Lagasse and work with them than cook up something of his own. So anywhere he could find a character and he had an idea, you know, he would plug somebody in. I think he used some of Howard's characters on occasion.
Right.
Certainly Lovecraft's, some of Lynn Carter's, and, you know, I mean, one of the things he ultimately really wanted to do was take all these other characters and turn them into incarnations of Teddy London. I know he wanted to do that with Zarnak.
It was actually, he had a concept that there was a person throughout history called the Destroyer, who kind of appears at various times to save the world from Cthulhu, in the same sense that, let's say, Buffy returns to kill vampires, and all these guys were going to be incarnations of the Destroyer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, those Howard stories, he did Conrad and Kirawan pastiches that were good. No, by the way, I should point out for the sake of posterity that he made me a character in some of the stories. I'm Professor Goward. And so next time you read about him and his hilarious exploits, it's me.
So you got eaten by a werewolf, then?
What's that?
If you're Professor Gower, you got eaten by a werewolf.
Oh, well, there are worse ways to go.
Not many.
You know, I got to tell you, CJ was one of the real reasons I wanted to go to Necronomicon, because he was one of the few people I hadn't met yet. And when he didn't make it, and then when he passed, it hit me really hard. And I had never met the guy. I'd only done a couple emails with him. And it really hit me hard. And I sat down and I tried to figure out why, because I really didn't know this guy. And going back, what I realized was that when I was a young whippersnapper collecting Lovecraftian mythos, the only thing that I could get my hand on in the late 70s and early 80s were the Arkham House books. and the Arkham House authors. You know, Lumley, Ramsey Campbell, August Derleth, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Bloch. Those guys were easy to get. In '84, I was buying, gaming magazines, role-playing games, and there in Fantasy Gamer is the original version of You Can't Take It With You.
Yeah, right.
Windows of the Soul, starring not Teddy London, but Jack Hagee.
Well, it always had Jack Hagee in it.
Well, here's the deal. Years later, he rewrites it into a novel.
Yes, that is true. It's not the same story, but the plot elements are the same.
Right, and he admits the rewriting the whole short story as this novel, the things that are out there with Teddy London. But literally, that story in that Fantasy Gamer let me know that there was a bigger world of Lovecraftian fiction out there. It was my introduction to mythos writing outside of Derleth's closed circle. And, I did not know that Crypt of Cthulhu existed until I went into college. I didn't know that anybody else wrote this stuff. All the stuff that Lynn Carter would do would not appear until the later part of the 80s. So this story let me know that there were other people playing in the sandbox.
You hadn't seen Paul Berglund's Disciples of Cthulhu?
Not yet.
Okay. All right.
Not in '84. I only could get things secondhand. There was no bookstore outside of Philadelphia that handled that kind of stuff. You could not get that in your barn. Well, back then it was in Walden Books. That stuff just wasn't available.
Disciples of Cthulhu came out in '76, so it would have been
right
by the time.
Yeah, and I would not have. The only place I would have picked it up would be secondhand. And then, all of a sudden I start seeing the Call of Cthulhu stuff comes out, and then Bob's series of mythos anthologies just explodes. But it's that story, that Windows to the Soul in Fantasy Gamer, that clues me in that there's a bigger world than the one I've been seeing.
Can I comment on the Hagee-London connection?
Sure.
What seems to have happened was he was writing Jack Hagee, and Jack Hagee is in 3 novels: No Free Lunch, Nothing Lasts Forever, Something for Nothing. There's a short story collection called What You Pay For, and he's scattered in various anthologies. And at apparently C.J. wrote this story where he was going to have Hagee meet the mythos, and it seemed to me he felt uncomfortable with that Hagee should be rooted in the real world. At the same time, he wrote a story called A Desert Story, or it might be called A Desert Adventure, I'm not sure of the exact title, which Bob published in, I think it was Pulse Pounding Adventures #2. And that was actually a Teddy London story, and it was an adventure story set in the Middle East. And what happened was C.J. apparently made a decision that he was going to swap them. He took the desert story and made that the Piper's Tune, and it became a Jack Hagee story. And he rewrote the Jack Hagee mythos story as the first Teddy London novel.
With the connection with Chris and Call of Cthulhu and so on, that brings to mind another fun episode. Once at Mark and Chuck's apartment, we had, I think, the only Call of Cthulhu game I ever played in. My wife Carol was there also, and Gahan Wilson came, and he then later wrote an account of this in Twilight Zone, and he did the cover on it, and that was a big Chris memory as well. It was really something to hobnob with these guys.
How'd the game go?
I don't even really remember. I've never been able to get into that. I just, it's like with me, like sports. I don't deny there's something to get, but I don't get it.
Did you say that he collaborated with you somewhat on Crypt of Cthulhu?
In the beginning, he had some ideas, but it wasn't long before. It was just that he occasionally would give me like a story or a column, like he did one of the Fun Guys from Yuggoth thing about. Jeez, I can't. No, I'm confused it with something else, but he did one of those, and he looked like we were almost going to be partners at one point in it, but somehow veered off of that. I could always rely on him, though, to do something for the latest Chaosium book, and I was always happy to have a new Teddy London story appear there. And
how many Teddy Londons did he do? He did short stories too. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, I've got him here.
Teddy London short stories. I mean,
I think he did 70 stories of Teddy London. He told me right before he died that you couldn't even do one collection of that because there were so darn many. I thought, 70? I mean, I'd read a few, but there was years, and he'd been plugging away at this.
There were some that have never been reprinted since their original fanzine publication. Like, you went to this published a story called The Slaying of Beauty, which was Teddy London battles ghouls. And that never got reprinted as far as I know.
Did I hear you say 70 Teddy London short stories?
Yes, incredible as it seems. That's what he told me. I have to confess I hadn't been keeping up on it. It's impossible to keep up with everything this guy wrote.
I suppose you could do a Kindle edition of Teddy London short stories, and it wouldn't be too... You wouldn't have the thickness problem, I suppose.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You see how retrograde I am. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of CJ, and I'm surprised that there were that many Teddy London stories. I sort of would be.
That's what he told me. I know it seems amazing.
Like 40 or something. You know?
Yeah, I would have thought a couple of 3 dozen, but you know.
Oh yeah, I'm quite sure. It just a few weeks ago, he told me there were 70 of them. Unbelievable.
Joe and Bob, could you guys, especially for the audience, I know everyone's always fascinated by the Calum Club. Could you guys just talk a little bit about that and, maybe relate a few experiences with the Calum Club with CJ?
Yeah. I'll start because my first invitation was right after Bob read Nightmare's Disciple, and he sent me an email. I got this little thing, a Calum Club. Lynn Carter, blah blah blah, H.P. Lovecraft, blah blah blah, and once a month we get together in New York at the Strand, and so I took the train to the city. I, walked from, Madison Square Garden down Broadway, and on the corner in front of the Strand there was Bob, Cisco, CJ, and I don't remember who else, a couple other people. I remember CJ and Cisco vividly, and of course Bob, because I'd only met Bob for, twice before that, for a total of maybe 10 minutes at a Necronomicon. And we stood outside for, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes. Introductions were made. And people just started talking about everything from H.P. Lovecraft to comic books. And like a lot of guys, I didn't have friends around to talk about this stuff with. So it was just amazing, and then they let the 6 or 7 of us loose inside the Strand, which, hey, look at this, look what I got, wow, And then we went across the street. It was the Silver Star or something.
Spurs. Silver
Spur.
Spurs.
And we had hamburgers and French fries and whatever, and we sat in there for a couple hours talking. And then Bob said, we'll do this again next month, but we're going to do this at my home in Jersey. So, and that's when I started going. But that first time, just walking down the street, and I could see Bob, and CJ was much taller than I was, and well, so was Cisco, as a matter of fact. And of course, Cisco, black, with the hair going back. And back then, I don't care, August, 10,000 degrees, and Cisco had this great black coat on, and a vest. And I remember marveling. It's like, God, I think you'd sweat to death in that. And I remember going home on the train thinking, wow, what am I doing here? These guys know so much. And I couldn't wait to hang out with them again. And then it turned into a monthly thing at Bob's. And it didn't take all that long, in actuality, where I didn't just go down for the day, but I'd go down and stay for the weekend and hang out. And like I said, we often brought new stuff to read. Cisco did, CJ did, I did. Those were, those were heady times to me, especially with Cisco, because Cisco was just starting to get published, and the things he was reading, which were shorts at that point, just mind-blowing. And it was great fun. We'd go to action figure stores, and, here you got these 40-year-old guys in Zap Comics, and you would have think they just let the kids from summer camp into the store with $5 to shop. Somebody'd be way in the back of the store looking and holding up something. Look at this! Wow! Oh my God! Are there 2 of those? I need one of those. But I mean, everybody was passionate. Everybody was enthusiastic. I think we all got a lot from each other creatively, and not necessarily ideas, but just by getting to hang out together. You sat at the campfire, you exchanged stories, you found out, if for somebody like me who had never written and who never intended to write, all this stuff was revelatory to me to find out how that. One of my big first revelations was, here's CJ, here's Bob, here's Cisco. Process is completely different for all 3 of these guys. I never studied writers or writing. I had no training. So I assumed, okay, you're a writer. Well, being a writer is like being an architect or being a fireman. You all do the same thing. And it's like, yeah, maybe ultimately you are all writing, but process couldn't be more different. So that was one of my first lessons. It's okay to do it the way you're doing it. If that's what works for you. The fact that everybody was so excited, I'm working on that, or I heard about this. When all was said and done and you were headed home, you carried that energy with you. And that, maybe more than anything. I mean, there was a time or two where I'm halfway home on the New York State Thruway, and I pulled over and pulled out my notebook and my pen and started writing. Because stuff was just in my head, and it's jazz to me. If you don't get it on paper, an hour later, it's not going to be there anymore.
Yeah.
So that was one of the great things from the Calum is just that amount of energy. I still remember once when the first time I met Brian McNaughton, he read, CJ read, and Cisco read. I assume I read, but just jawed. I just sat there like, oh my God. And to have Brian McNaughton read one of his new Ghoul stories, followed by Cisco reading one of his new shorts, it was like, I don't want to go home. So that's what happened at all of the, mostly it was just talking. It was these small little summer camps, where everybody's, did you hear about this? Or, oh, I'm going to have a story in that, or, these types of gatherings where the creators get the opportunity to hang out, you get so much juice from that. It can last a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
It was like having a mini convention, and it was this kind of thing. Like I've gone to academic conventions, which I hate, and but this kind of thing, going to the bigger conventions every great once in a while, and the Necronomicon and the Flick Fest and so forth, has shown me that it really is enlivening and professionally important. But that is what we had every month with the Calum Club, and for instance, I really was unfamiliar with Brian McNaughton's work. I knew of a few of the books he had done, but I'd never really even understood what his work was like. And when he came to that meeting, and maybe one or two afterward at Rod Heather's invitation, it was like a kind of a mini rediscovery of this author. Not that he hadn't been published far and wide, but I was just amazed at the quality of this guy's writing, and then we brought him to the Necronomicon, and a wider group got to know him, and all sorts of things could happen. These days, the thing has shrunk to something that happens every a couple of years when Joe is in the neighborhood, and we get Mark Rainey over from Greenville, I guess it is, and we shoot the breeze in the same way, and that's few and far between these days.
Mark's a great guy.
They were great fun. I mean, a couple of years back, it was basically me, Bob, and Mark Rainey, and it was like Godzilla Fest of all that weekend, But these things, the Calums were like that. I mean, you would get on a subject, and perhaps, this month, that's what we all talked about all day. Cisco introduced me to the Quay brothers there. There was no smoking allowed at Bob's, so I would go out on the front porch to have a cigarette, and as it worked out over a period of time, Cisco also often came out and hung out with me, and I owe him so much. I remember once out there, he said something, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, and he's like, you don't know Jean Ray? And I'm like, no, don't even know the name. And the next month, he showed up with a copy of Malpertuis and said, you need this. Cisco completely changed me as a writer. If you look at Nightmare's Disciple, and then you look at Blood Will Have Its Season, in Blood Will Have Its Season, you have Pitch Nothing. Pitch Nothing was one of those things, it's like, I sat there and I listened to Cisco so many times. And Cisco was wonderful, and he'd often, praise my work. But, really wanted to, with Pitch of Nothing, come up with something that Cisco thought was pretty damn cool. And I wanted it to be a, hey, thanks for turning me on to the kind of things you've been turning me on to. And more than anyone, Cisco's the one who, showed me to read outside the box. Anything I liked could be used as an influence. It didn't have to be horror. It didn't have to be weird fiction. Just the nature of weird fiction is it incorporates whatever it wants to, whatever it needs.
Well, actually, before I ask that question, Pete, you've got 3 C.J. Henderson books to give away, right? Can you hold those up?
I went and did a little shopping yesterday, and I found 2 copies. Everything's used. 2 copies of Teddy London's Some Things Never Die, written under C.J.'s pen name Robert Morgan, and a big fat anthology featuring C.J. I think twice. I think he's in here twice.
Can I win that?
It's a Kolchak collection. The Night Stalker Chronicles. There's 26 stories.
That should probably go to the host, I'm thinking.
Well.
And it seems to me, back at all those Kalums, CJ would talk about Kolchak at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, Rick and I don't need much excuse to talk about Kolchak.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, he was the first guy I met who I probably would have nominated for this Kolchak fan in the universe. He really adored Kolchak.
For everybody watching live right now, if you'd like to win one of these books, I'm going to use random.org. Let me put you on the screen there, Pete. I'm going to use random.org to give away these 3 books. Just email me at lovecraftezine@gmail.com, Lovecraft, E-Z-I-N-E, @gmail.com, and put C.J. Henderson in the subject. Put C.J. Henderson drawing in the subject of the email, if you would. And at the end of the show, I will announce the winners.
Yep. Okay, so we'll do the first person you draw gets the big fat book, and the second 2 people get the smaller ones.
Is that a different version of the edition of the same thing, Rick?
Well, what I want to go through one of the stories in what was that, the Kolchak Compendium or?
Yeah. The Chronicles.
Chronicles. One of the stories was a mythos story involving Nyartha from Henry Kuttner's The Salem Horror and a recurring newspaper program called Challenge of the Unknown, which Bob published, I think, one story about a 40% share in Innsmouth, I think it was the title. And there were 2 later Kolchak mythos stories. One has Bob's doppelganger, Zachary Goward, in it. Gets to tell Kolchak everything you want to know about deep ones, but we're afraid to ask. So you can get them all from Moonstone Books in the Kolchak Necronomicon. He did 2 non-mythos Kolchak novels. One is called A Black and Evil Truth, which is also from Moonstone, and a very small paperback called The Lost World, which has nothing to do with dinosaurs.
Did he set his Kolchak novels in the 70s, like the show, or modern?
No. Moonstone requires that you set all the Kolchak stories in modern times.
Okay.
So you're going to see Kolchak using the internet and whatever, cell phones. And what's interesting about Moonstone's rights to the character they have the rights from the original creator, Jeff Rice, who wrote the novel, which was then, when they made a TV movie, when Dan Curtis made the TV movie, The Night Stalker, that novel was unpublished. It later got published after the TV movie came out. And since they only have the rights to that, technically you can't use anything directly from the TV show. So you can't have a character reappear who, let's say, fought Kolchak in the TV show in the story, because I submitted a Kolchak story for him. That's why I know all these restrictions. But you can do it if you can get away with it if you do it in a disguised way. And you can make vague references that, you know, he was on some cruise, was a werewolf. I think CJ did mention that in one of his stories.
And CJ did ghostwriting too. I remember him talking about at least one thing he ghost wrote for William Shatner.
Right, yeah.
Really?
And he had a lot positive to say about Shatner. He said Shatner treated him like he was king. And I can't remember some of the other things, but he did ghostwrite some things for, you know, people with names.
What was it? A Star Trek novel?
No, one of them was called Man of War. I think it was science fiction, but it was the Tech War series, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
I remember the day.
He seems pretty prolific for such a busy guy, Shatner.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Chris said once that I just got this writing gig for somebody who you would undoubtedly know, but I cannot say. And then a few years later, Carol and I happened to be watching some TV show in the morning, and Shatner's on there being interviewed, and I asked him about his books, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I wrote this with Chris Henderson," and we nearly fell off the bed. So that's who it was. Sheesh.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
DJ could write really quick. Like I said, I literally sat there at Calem's where Bob said, "Yeah," you know, he'd put his fingers in his beard and he's like, "I should do a Naria Lapatep book on this series." And well, Bob, I need to be in that. How many words you need? Oh, I don't know, 5,000. And I'd go home Sunday afternoon, and I'd be talking to Bob at the end of the week. He's like, "Oh, yeah, CJ sent me a story yesterday." I'm like, "Already?" I mean, he could crank them out, but maybe that's not the right word. But like I said, Monday, if you tell him I want 5,000 words on blue curtains, you'd have them on Friday. Hell, you'd probably have them on Wednesday. You know, I used to marvel at it. Like I would love to be. I mean, certainly I've written stuff that just came out in an instant, but that's not normally the case, you know. But he had that ability. He could, you know, his fingers could fly.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of flying, I'm afraid I'm going to have to. But what a joy to get together with all of you and to discuss our departed friend.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Bob. Appreciate it.
Okay, all of you too.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All you got to do is close this. Yeah, there he goes. He knows what to do. Yeah. He's a computer expert.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, it's good though, because he makes me look good on computers.
I've got a recent C.J. Henderson book to plug.
The what?
I got a recent C.J. book to plug.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. He's got a recurring character named Lai Wan, who's a supporting character in the Teddy London books.
Okay.
And Moonstone book came out was a collection of some of the stories about her called Lywan Dreamwalker. And one story she meets Kolchak, and in the other story is the sequel to the Dunwich Horror.
What? Can you hold that up a little higher? Because I couldn't see the title. A little bit up higher, up a little bit higher.
Oh, I'm
There
sorry.
you go. Okay, good. Thanks.
Now, what edition is that? Because mine looks completely different. Oh.
If you got the one that's a totally different book. That's
Yeah.
Tales of the Dreamwalker.
All right.
This one has the Lywan comics book stories.
Oh, okay.
Also published. It has a story called The Minds of the Dead, which has Kolchak in it. And let me see the title of the Dunwich Horror one. Is Terrible Anticipation.
Okay.
So those are two totally separate books with different contents.
How many Thomas Malone stories did he write, approximately? That character interests me.
He wrote two that I know of.
Short stories or novels?
Short stories. The first one is in the case files of Thomas Malone, and which was, let's see, who published that? Looks like Die Monster Died Books. And that published The Horror at Red Hook and CJ's story. I got to look at what the title is. The Power of Fear, which is a sequel to Shadow over Innsmouth.
Okay.
And there was, now there's a second one which I don't think has been published yet, which is non-supernatural. And that's got an odd history. Robert E. Howard created a character named Steve Harrison.
Yeah, right. Bob used that character in Dope War to Tong.
Yeah. And he was a weird menace detective, even though Bob crossed him over into the mythos. And he lived in River Street, where Anton Zarnak, Lynn Carter put Anton Zarnak. And there was a outline for an outline by Robert E. Howard for a Steve Harrison story that wasn't set in River Street. It was set in Lost Knob, Texas, which was sort of a fictional version of Cross Plains, Texas, where Howard lived. And CJ got a deal originally with the Howard Estate to write that as a short story, which was going to be called The Greenest Cut of All. And what happened was, I guess there was the Howard Estate management changed hands and they soured on posthumous collaborations, so that they canceled publishing that story. So he rewrote it as a Thomas Malone. And when I met it, I talked to him like about 2009. He was nice enough to send me a copy of it, but as far as I know, it hasn't been published anywhere.
And CJ did finish one of Howard's fragments, because Bob had two fragments that he wanted to use in the Chaosium cycle, the Robert E. Howard edition. What was that called? Something cults? Dark cults?
The Abbey. He did two Howard fragments. He did Dagon Manor, and the other one he did was the Abbey. Out of here.
Well, in the Howard cycle book, he did one of the fragments, because I know I did the other fragment.
Yeah, in the book you're talking about is Nameless Cults.
Yeah, Nameless Cults. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah.
That was the book.
Yeah.
And I just want to verify. I think it's called the Abbey.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the Abbey.
Yeah, because
Now,
I remember at one of the Kalums where Bob said there's 2 Howard fragments and I'm planning this book, and we were standing there, the 3 of us, over one of the boxes of pizza, and he said to CJ, I want you to do this one, and Joe, I want you to do this. And I'm like, I'm not doing a Howard fragment. Are you nuts? And then the 2, then and he showed both of them to CJ, and CJ handed me the one Bob wanted to do, and he said, this is perfect for you, and you're the only guy crazy enough to do it. So I got drafted into doing that.
You and Bob were talking a lot about the Calum Club with C.J. Henderson and Cisco and so on and so forth. And you're in Germany. We all are long ways away from each other. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with these Sunday chats.
That's what to me, that's what these are turning into.
Yeah.
I mean, we often talk about a certain subject, but there's a whole lot of times we just go off on a tangent and, within 15 minutes, and that's what we talk about for 2 hours, wherever we drift, which often that's a ton of fun. It seems like the viewers have reacted that way, too.
What they tell me is those are the ones they enjoy the most. And when I pick a topic, I usually say something like, when I'm promoting it on the Facebook page, I say something like, we'll start off talking about this, but who knows where we'll end up. And that's fun, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, other than the fact Pete never brings pizza.
Yeah.
Or when he does, he just sits there and eats it himself.
All right, well, maybe in a couple weeks I'll figure something out how to get you guys some pizza.
How you doing, Livia?
You got that boat, Pete. You come across the pond. You come right up the river. My God, the river's right down the street, Pete. You get up here down.
Dude, I can't even send you a book.
Yeah.
Customs is horrific.
I just might as well be in Russia or something. You would think the wall is still up the way Customs is here. It took me 2 weeks to literally free, and I mean free, my copy of Children O' Leech from the paws of Customs.
So you finally got it.
I finally got it. Ross made one error filling out the Customs. When the Customs form is filled out properly, this stuff flies through. But if you forget anything on the form, forget it. They literally lock it up, and then they contact you, and you got to get a hold of people, and you got to get official documentation on corporate letterhead, that says, yep, that's this, blah, 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 blah. 322 pages with 8x10 glossies, and then you give it to Customs, and they sort through it, and then they finally decide, oh yeah, okay, it's not contraband, it's not Nazi material. We'll let you have it. But in Europe now we have a VAT tax, and all these customs departments are afraid that what they think is, if we hold, let's check this out, make sure we can't get our 20% out of it. So if it's a contributor's copy, they want Jesus to come down and verify that fact.
Wait,
That's a government sales tax. A national sales tax.
Yeah.
Did you just equate Jesus with Ross Lockhart?
Huh?
Did you just equate Jesus with Ross Lockhart?
Many have.
I mean,
Well, I thought we should equate Robert M. Price with.
I don't equate anybody with Jesus Christ because, like, Ross is living, breathing folks, and Jesus was, well, you know. Never mind, we won't go there. Hi, Livia. How are you this evening?
Hi, I'm fine. I've just been listening, having a great time.
You're like I used to be on these chats originally. I didn't know who Lad Barron was when I started with these chats.
Yeah, Rick used to be our wallflower. He would just kind of sit, but once a show, Rick would pull out some fact about, oh yeah, he had a 700-word review in the 1922 issue of blah blah blah. You know.
Yeah. Only Rick knows that Peter Capaldi wrote a fan letter to Doctor Who magazine when he was 4 years old.
Yeah. Rick's like a nice version of Daryl Schweitzer.
Wow, it's a good thing this isn't being...
I'm not associated with
You're going to get some static over that one. Next time you want him to contribute to the anthology.
I just thought maybe we needed to liven it up a hair.
And you just did.
Yeah.
More
Oh
hateful.
no! You mean I'm going to be unfriended on Facebook? Oh, woe is me.
Yeah, I got unfriended by a couple people on Facebook this week, and I think it's because I'm friends with you. So.
Hey, I got unfriended a little bit too. But there's some of our other close friends, Mike, who've recently been unfriended, so we're in good company.
Well, I cried myself to sleep a couple nights, and then I was fine.
Yeah,
So.
I didn't even shave for like 6 weeks because I was afraid I might commit suicide.
Wow.
I mean, I was almost at a point where I looked like I could be the 4th member of ZZ Top because I was afraid to use scissors. But I got over it.
Olivia, are you, I've been meaning to ask you this, are you planning on going to Necronomicon next year?
Yes, I am. I was all signed up for last year, but I had to cancel at the last minute because of my job situation. But you know how things are in the publishing industry. But assuming that my job sticks for another year, then yes, absolutely. I'm actually really not joking.
No, I understand.
In this economy, nothing is certain.
Yeah. You know, so, but whether I'm working in publishing or working at Starbucks, I will definitely be saving up my pennies to go, so.
And we know people in New York, so basically if she says, no, I changed my mind, we'll just have them drive over to Jersey, politely knock on the door, you know, and then it'll be an episode of like some TV show. You know, the young, attractive girl opens the door, poof, in a bag, and you know, shows up hundreds of miles someplace else, you know.
Violating the Mann Act.
Yeah, wait a minute, didn't the Mann Act have something to do with, like, underage people?
Yeah, all you had to do was cross the state line.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not crossing the state line just because I arrange it.
Just so everyone's very clear, my uncle is a U.S. federal marshal, so that won't ever happen.
Yeah. My uncle drove for Bruno Sammartino in Philly. What's your point?
Ooh.
We can.
Her point is she doesn't need any more stalkers. Thank you.
No, but seriously,
so
Olivia.
what you mean is, anytime you need any any like hard data, you just pick up the phone and say, you know, did you do this or would you do that? You know, you have access to inside material. That's always
serious, Olivia. I think what we're trying to say is that if you run into some trouble, there are alternatives. Because Vince, our friend Vince, who lives in Jersey, is supposed to be picking up Rick on the way to Providence. So if you need a ride,
Well, actually,
right. No one
Turner
needs to
just
show up
posted.
at my door and put a bag over my head. And
right?
that's what I was
Just show up at
was,
your door.
Well,
you know, I was hoping to get Vince to do that, but I haven't got a formal invitation yet.
Well, we know people who would just ring the doorbell and carry your suitcase down and put it in the trunk and open the door for you and drive you there.
Rodney Turner just posted on the message board that he has a van. So.
With blackout windows or just regular?
I assume he means kidnap van. Yeah.
Are they asleep in the van?
It's better than Amtrak.
Wait, does it have like a Frazetta painting on the side?
Knowing him, it probably does.
Actually, I would get in a van with that, Franzetta.
Actually, seeing as how it's him, it probably has comic book characters painted all over the van. That ought to get a comment on the message board, huh?
Lily, you won the... I can't even get the words out. I'm so upset about this.
Well,
you won the Kolchak book that I want.
Davis, you had 15 minutes before this show started to go, hey, Pete, can I have that book?
I'm too honest. That's the problem. So, Lily, you won the Kolchak book, C.J. Henderson Kolchak book, and the other two are Kim, you won one of the others, and David Burse won the other one. So, Kim Smelter and David Burse won the second and third ones, and Lily won the...
All right. So send me if you're friends on Facebook, send me your addresses and what book you're supposed to get. Don't lie.
No fibbing.
No fibbing.
Or you can reply to me.
We know Olivia is getting the Kolchak book, so the other two books are the same edition.
Yeah.
No,
so
Lily
and David are getting the same edition. Okay.
So.
Can you imagine Olivia writing a Kolchak story? That'd be pretty cool.
Actually, I have a confession to make. When Kolchak was on, I was like maybe 9, 10 years old, and every summer for years after that, I would dress up in a little, like a seersucker suit that I made myself. My mother helped me, and tennis shoes. And I had a little camera that I got from my mother that I put on a strap over my head, and then I had my grandfather's Panama hat, and every summer I was Kolchak, and I would go around our little neighborhood solving mysteries, and all the kids thought I was a complete psychopath, but this is the Pacific Northwest, so everyone's a psychopath. So it's really difficult for me to admit, but I have a natural obsession with Kolchak. I called myself Kolchak's daughter. I even created a little tiny INS news badge.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
So I would go door to door and say, you know, I'm with the INS. I'm Kolchak's daughter. I'm investigating your dog missing or whatever.
That's
you know.
Awesome.
Wow.
I was and many summers after. And this wasn't Halloween. I had different costumes for Halloween, but during the summer when all the kids were out playing, you know, we would form little bands and groups, and my little group of people, we would solve mysteries, spooky mysteries, and I was Kolchak's daughter. So yeah.
So you're like a hipper Mystery Incorporated.
The things you learn on this show.
Are there any pictures of you as Kolchak's daughter?
You know, I think there might be. My mother probably has a couple, and yes, I will post them someday.
That would be excellent.
We need to see them.
Yeah.
Actually, I just love the whole idea of Kolchak's daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you pitch that to Moonstone Books? I can put you in contact with the publisher. Kolchak's daughter.
Yeah. And she's a ginger, right?
Of course, absolutely. Aaron McGavin had a little ginger in his hair.
Yeah, they called him a ginger on the show.
Yeah.
You know, he always could have had a daughter by that girl he was dating in Vegas.
Yeah.
that Carol Lindley played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have dated Carol Lindley. Oh,
I mean, Carol Lindley would have to be the mother because that's the only story that Moonstone of that period that Moonstone has the rights to. So if you have to use a character, it has to be somebody created by Jeff Rice.
Yeah.
She might have a different name in the novel. That was the one problem is if you use elements from the first story, you have to do what they did in the novel. So like the FBI agent had a different name. This is when I was writing a Kolchak story. I was finding all these things. The FBI agent had a different name. There was all sorts of little minor differences.
yeah, it's just cool. Kolchak's daughter. She's young. She's hip. It takes place now. You know, maybe Daddy died. And Daddy got killed by a werewolf, and she's got an axe to grind.
Well, you know, I was very disappointed when they rebooted the series because I thought nothing against Stuart Townsend, and I didn't actually think the writing was bad, but there didn't need to be a new Kolchak. Why couldn't there have been a son or a daughter of Kolchak? And you know,
Yeah.
I actually have like in my little writing folder on my tiny flash drive. I have a folder. It's Kolchak's daughter, and you know, someday I'll write something. I don't know if it'll be a novel or a novella, but yeah.
The funny thing about the revival, they took very little from the original TV show other than the characters' names.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole format was just, originally they wanted to use monsters, and then they said no, we can't use monsters. And what's the purpose of the show then?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what.
Jack anymore.
I think what we just learned, just in itself, justifies this show being on the. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned.
And now I have another question.
Oh, Lord.
Because we have all these latent fantasies, you know, and I mean, you know, you live in Jersey there, you're right across, you can get to New York, and, you know, what is there, 4 million people in the city on a regular...
12 million.
Whatever.
Close.
There's a lot of people there. Do any of these people walking around New York ever notice you walking around in the evening with your Kolchak regalia on nowadays?
No, there's no way that anyone would notice anyone dressed like that. People can dress up like giant chickens or in diapers. You know, no one's going to notice you. It's New York City.
Mm-hmm.
You might make it on the Humans of New York, but that's about it.
Yeah, people would just think I'm like some kind of, you know, slightly off-center hipster or something. We're just some really sad person.
Which you are.
Yeah. So.
A sad hipster. Okay.
She's a writer, so there you go.
Yeah.
You know what I always wondered? Why did men's hats go out of style? I mean, hats in general, but those cool '70s hats, you know. I mean,
I still have a hat. I have a fedora. I have a top hat.
70s hats. In my neck of the woods, everybody was wearing cowboy hats. You know, because of Southern rock.
Yeah.
What's that on your head, Pete?
That's my fez. This is what happens when you get like $10 extra at Hot Topic. You end up getting a
Okay.
Wait, what else did you get at Hot Topic?
Seeing Pete was that I now know why they outlawed them in Turkey.
My wife was going to Universal with friends, so she got everyone the Minion shirts, and they all wore Minion shirts to Universal, and we got bonus cash, and we went in there and we picked out little things for each other. Peter got a Death Note shirt, if you know who Death Note is, or what Death Note is.
I have no idea who.
Death Note, it was a manga, and then it was an anime, and I may get this wrong in the order, but it's also a live-action movie. It's about a kid who gets a notebook that whoever name you write in the notebook dies.
It's kind of like the Richard Boone movie, I Buried the Living.
Yeah, and he's assisted by an angel of death, who gives him advice that nobody can see.
It's like a doomsday candle.
Yeah, and then there's a kind of well, I guess his counterpart is this kid named L, who's like can't be more than 20 or so, and who eats nothing but sugar because he has a super high metabolism to feed his brain. And he's in pursuit of this kid who's just killing villains around the world just by writing their name in the book. And it's really well done. There's 3 movies in the series.
I guess he hasn't gotten around to Vladimir Putin yet.
No, he does. He takes care of mostly non-political things, but there are essentially what they figure out is that based on the time that people die, that he's a college student or a high school student with a very specific schedule, and in a specific time zone. So those are the kinds of things that work out. But yeah, that's what my son got. I got a fez, a cheap cardboard fez. But yeah, what do you expect? $10. So there you go. But I have 3 or 4 hats. I like hats.
I got a bunch of hats. Maybe we should have hat night on the video chat one.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Pick some evening, and we'll all bring hats. But we gotta have Willem stop by because Willem's got hats.
Yeah, 1 or 2.
And gloves and.
Well, I got gloves over there. They're just not gold lame or anything.
Do you have fingerless gloves?
Yes, I do. It gets colder than shit here. And you still need to type.
I think you should move someplace where you don't need gloves to type. I'm just putting it out there.
Well, it gets chilly here. Sometimes.
I use fingerless gloves in the winter. Here.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. See, Livia, there's somebody who's sensible.
Yeah.
We don't all live in Florida and Texas.
Hey, I don't like hot weather. I like cold weather.
Yeah, I'm actually.
I always associate fingerless gloves with Peter Cushing. You use him as Baron Frankenstein in Dr. Terror.
Yeah. There was a thread on my Facebook that came through today about how they were lamenting the fact that they missed being in Portland, and yeah, I got to agree. I got to get out of Florida, Portland or Providence, some culture.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the internet, I'd definitely be going nuts.
The way you're going, Pete, you're going to wind up with anacondas in your backyard for crying out loud.
Dude, something new came out this month.
Oh, you got a new terror down there,
yeah,
huh?
we do, and it's these stupid tegus. Are burrowing into the levees and robbing alligator nests. I think they are. These New Zealand lizards.
The action never stops in Florida.
Yeah.
God's waiting.
Between pythons, false water cobras, Gambian pocket rats, kudzu, monitor lizards, basilisks. Yeah. We have got tiger mosquitoes now too.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Which apparently prefer to carry, parasitic chickamauga, yellow fever. This is our new thing now. We have chickamauga, which is this Haitian Caribbean disease that makes the other one we had last year was bone break fever, Chickamauga apparently makes that look like a walk in the park.
Wow.
So, not fatal, you just wish you were dead.
So every time you go outside, you could win the lotto.
Did you ever see a movie with Ray Milland called Frogs?
Yes.
Oh, yes!
That's what Florida sounds like right now.
Actually, I wouldn't mind living in that house and on that island because, at least they knew what they were up against. Here, no, it keeps getting worse. There's no control. I guess. Oh, and I guess we got coyote sightings now in the eastern cities. They're
we
moving
had
back in.
coyotes up the wazoo in upstate New York.
Yeah. Lionfish are now a problem.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
What the hell is that?
Geez, Anna Tambor lives in the bush in Australia, and she'll post a picture of a Komodo dragon on her fucking back porch. But I think she's safer nowadays than you are.
Yeah. Basically, when I go fishing, the captains have to do this speech now that says, if you bring something up that you don't recognize, don't touch it. Because it could kill you.
That's good. That's really...
and there's a great white shark named Catherine that's trolling up and down the coast. So,
why did they decide to name her Catherine?
I have no idea.
And how do they know it's a female?
Well, it's one of these that they've tagged. They've caught it and tagged it, and they're doing studies on it. But they at the beginning, like in spring, it moved down the coast and went into the Caribbean, and now it just popped back up, moving off of Broward County and heading north. So, yeah, and I guess the transmitter only pings when it comes up to the surface.
Well, Florida, Miami, you're known for all that exotic beach wear, so maybe Catherine's just shopping for a new bikini.
Yeah, sure.
Or a boy.
Yeah, exactly. Miami must have a lot of cabana boys.
Whoa!
She's just a lady looking for a little love.
That's it. You take her, she'll take you out to lunch, and
Yeah, she'll take you to lunch.
Yeah.
You won't come back.
Hey, let's face it. It's the 21st century. I protested decades ago for women's rights. I wanted women to come up and say, hey, can I take you out to lunch? I got old and that didn't happen to me, so I'm glad it's happening to some other guy.
What's the old joke? When I was a kid, dogs and cats couldn't vote.
Especially if she's got teeth like Brucey, for crying out loud. I was young. I wanted to be devoured by women, but...
Did you just get a new job as a Florida travel agent?
I am. Yep. And I figure everybody's been to Disney, so I want them to see the really exotic sights.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's face it. Nowadays, hey, you're on internet. There's all these trolls out there. There's all these guys. I feel sorry for the women on social networks because if you're really attractive, you're screwed. But even if you're just mildly attractive, I can only imagine the crap you have to put up with. So, all these guys who really want to meet up with somebody, I'm sure they'd love to get hugged in Florida by one of these, 32-foot anacondas. You want a hug? There you go, buddy. She'll take care of you.
Who's counting?
I agree with that. I think every internet troll should have a date with an anaconda.
We'll get everybody nice out of Florida, and we'll send all the ass bags on the internet to be the new residents of Florida. we'll
they aren't
build a
already.
wall, you know, and
Wait. Did I just become an ass bag?
I said we'll get everybody nice out of Florida.
Yeah, but Livia said that if they aren't ass bags already, I'm like,
No, if they aren't there already.
yeah,
There.
yeah. I mean, I admit, I have a very
Livia
strong
doesn't need
personality.
an editor. She
Well,
knows
yeah,
what words she was
about
putting
you.
out there.
Oh, but I swear to God, the worst part of Florida is the drivers.
Yeah, they're all old people.
And they're from all over the world. You have people from France and Sweden and Jamaica and Haiti and South America and Canada and Texas.
You know what? I'm not hypocritical about this. When I'm old, I'll be the first person to say I'm not driving. You drive me. You know?
Yeah.
I don't want to drive now.
My son is going to turn 15 in January. He doesn't want his license.
Well,
Doesn't
based
what?
on what you're describing, he sounds
Yeah,
quite sane. Why would he?
It's terrifying to drive down here. He has decided that he doesn't want his
Oh
license.
no, I don't want a license.
Come
No,
here,
no, no.
come here. Say hi. This is my kid.
I lost all my hair today. Yesterday.
Hey.
Yes, yeah, we
So
both hit.
that's a good. Well, there's a really good reason, Pete, why he can come over and go, Dad, I need $20.
That's right. He needs to take a taxi.
Yeah.
A cab. You gotta have cab fare.
Gotta have
You know?
cab. And that's still cheaper than
you start dating a nice woman who's got a car and drives you around, but you don't tell the old man so you can keep stringing him along for cab money.
Nice. Nice.
I'm just trying to help the poor guy out. He's young, a couple of tips,
When I was 16,
When you were stealing cars,
I was.
See, what a good kid he is. He's 15. He hasn't stolen any cars.
Nope. And I was jacking radios too. But
there. Another couple of years,
yeah.
it's going to be interesting what crimes you'll have committed.
When I was 16,
Ones we'll have found out about.
I flew to Japan, and I woke up in the cab after like an 18-hour flight. I stayed up the whole time. I woke up in the cab, and we're on the wrong side of the road. And I've completely forgotten that that's where you're supposed to be. So I start screaming in the back of the cab. Because we're on the wrong side of the road.
You got viewers, Mike. You got ex-car thieves, and you got Kolchak cosplay by 8-year-old girls.
Cosplay.
Kolchak cosplay.
Yeah.
I am
That
Kolchak.
makes me think of his planes. That scene in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Remember when Steve Martin wakes up and what's his name? John. What was his last name?
John Candy.
John Candy was driving, and he realizes they're on the wrong. The people across the way are like, "You're going the wrong way. You're going to kill someone." And John Candy's like, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. They're drunk. How would they know where we're going?" And Steve Martin's like, "Yeah, how would they know?"
So, to finish my story, here's what happened. The guy takes a left onto the railroad tracks to cut through traffic. So, we're driving down there and going, blah, and he's like, "Don't worry, I do this all the time. There's no train for another 8 minutes."
Oh my God.
I'm glad the car didn't
I
stall.
found out later that this is actually something cabbies do because they can cut through there, and the trains actually do run on time in Japan. But
That's
you know,
nice.
please, no. That was the last cab I took.
All right. Can we steer this program back to Lovecraft somehow? I was just wondering, Livia, do you ever play the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game?
No, I never have. Those games are just something I've never really been interested in.
Well, you have a great character, Kolchak's daughter, if you ever want to.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We play on Tuesdays and Fridays, me with some other Lovecraft eZine followers. We should do a Kolchak Lovecraft scenario. It'd be great.
And there were some great Kolchak Lovecraft episodes, which
Yes.
we've talked about previously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that show. Wish we had more than one season to watch.
Well, in a way, it's good we had one season because
that's how you make a cult classic.
No, even when I was watching the show back then, what direction did the show have to go? I mean, there was always going to be a monster in Chicago. You know, he's going to have fights with Tony. He's going to find some obscure expert on the subject, and it's going to end with him killing the monster.
Yes, and Buffy did it for 7 years.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Buffy did different things, though. Buffy got into story arcs where, you know, you had a recurring villain. And
yeah, you weren't here when we talked about it before, Olivia, but it was either Rick or Pete that said something about that Chicago must have a hellmouth.
Yeah.
Because of Kolchak, you know.
Yeah, well, that's where. Oh no, that was Detroit. Okay.
That was Detroit. That's right. But yeah, I get your point, Rick. I mean, it comes down to the what I call the Cabot Cove problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's just suddenly, you know, this small podunk little town has more murders per capita than New York City.
But really, it comes down to the writers and what the network and the producers will allow them to do.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of people with all kinds of ideas. I mean, I'm a stark raving fan of Olivia's. I can just knowing that she's a big fan of Kolchak, it's like, yeah, that would be a gas to read something by her doing Kolchak.
Well, someone needs to create a new anthology of Kolchak stories, and then
You know, I would do it, but you know, I don't have the rights.
Well, if Moon's, I think they closed the one I sent a story for. So if they ever come up with a new one, I'll make sure they have your name.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've always wanted to do a Vincenzo story.
You
know, because here's the thing. Kolchak has to be the worst reporter, right? He spends weeks working on a story, and then it's like 2 paragraphs because he can't tell the truth.
No. You know, I think what happens is they don't really show it, but he fights his boss off by he writes the lame, stupid stories that every other reporter works on, but they just show the interesting ones on the show. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I think in the current book, short story series, they couldn't use INS.
Right.
So he works for some Hollywood tabloid. So I think they expect him to write stories like that.
Okay,
so he's like working for something like the Inquirer now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't realize he's working for a tabloid. That's even better. Look at back in the day especially when you and I were kids, Rick, all those tabloids that were in the markets. I mean, you know, they discovered that apes actually came from Abe Lincoln's DNA and stuff. You know.
That boy.
That boy. You know who used to work?
Well, you know, when you're 9 years old and you can sneak one of these tabloids, they're amazing. They were amazing reading back in the day.
Oh yeah, I believed it too.
So imagine what Kolchak could uncover in those pages.
My wife is telling me that it's that supper's ready, so I'm gonna get going. No, but seriously.
All right, well, let me just tell you this. Mike Resnick used to work for the Weekly World News.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Science fiction writer, where
Oh, that was it?
he goes to work for the Weekly World News. Back in the day, when he first started out, he was writing his Jupiter stories. Under the name Michael D. Resnick. So,
Well, when I read all these Inquirer-type magazines when I was a kid, I told myself, when I grow up, I believed it all. So when I said to myself, when I grow up, I'm gonna investigate all this stuff, you know. So then you get to be an adult and you realize that maybe one or two articles in those things are not entirely true.
You think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no real dinosaur boy and all that stuff. It's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for the show, guys. Thanks for being here and talking about CJ and guess I'll see you guys next Sunday or Saturday night. So
Actually, I'm sitting here thinking about Kolchak's daughter.
My work is done.
Yeah.
No, it's not, because you got to get a hold of your mom to get the photograph.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's going to be a feature. Mike's going to put that up on the eZine online when you get them.
absolutely.
Okay, I'll work on it.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Good to
Good
talk
night,
to you.
everybody.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
Everybody take care. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Talk to you soon.